there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of heaven shall be shaken. One man, one microphone, one mission, one message. TRU News, the only newscast reporting the countdown to the second coming of Jesus Christ. And now for the most powerful hour on radio, here is End Time Newsman, Rick Wiles.
This is TRU News, 1 hour of uncensored news, views, and commentary. Welcome to the program. I'm Rick Wiles. Today is Friday, August 15, 2014. Former Muslim Brotherhood member and now born-again Christian WALID SHOEBAT will join me in about 12 minutes. We'll talk about Barack Hussein Obama's Muslim tendencies. Let's first look at the latest world headlines. Recent events in Ukraine have dramatically increased the probability of an all-out war between Russia and Ukraine, a war that could escalate into a nuclear confrontation between Russia and NATO. The situation is very tense. We'll start with a report filed Thursday night by reporters for London's Telegraph. They reported seeing a column of armored vehicles and military trucks cross the border from Russia into Ukraine Thursday night. This convoy was not the same as the 270 truck convoy hauling humanitarian aid to the people in eastern Ukraine. The Telegraph reporters claimed they witnessed the vehicles, including both armored personnel carriers and soft-skinned lorries or tractor and trailers, crossing into Ukraine at an obscure border crossing near the Russian town of Donetsk shortly before 10 p.m. local time. The convoy, which included at least 23 vehicles, appeared to be waiting until sunset near a refugee camp outside the city before moving towards the crossing without turning off headlights or making any other attempt to conceal itself. While it was not immediately clear, said the Telegraph, whether all of that convoy crossed the border, the Telegraph reporters did see, according to their report, a substantial number of vehicles pass through a checkpoint manned by gunmen after shadowing the convoy down narrow country lanes near the frontier. While the force did not seem to be a substantial invasion force, the London paper said it confirms that military supplies are moving over the border. While the APCs carried no visible markings, the fuel tankers and soft-skinned trucks in the convoy bore black Russian military number plates. The vehicles did not appear to be associated with the Russian aid convoy that was camped 20 miles farther down the same road. Okay, now that was last night. This is where it stands today. Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko told British Prime Minister David Cameron that Ukrainian artillery destroyed a significant part of a Russian armored column that crossed into his country last night. President Poroshenko did not offer any proof to back up his statement. A spokesman for the Ukrainian army said the Russian armored column was tracked as soon as it crossed into Ukrainian soil. Ukrainian military spokesman Andrei Lysenko said, quote, appropriate actions were taken and part of it no longer exists, end of quote. In Moscow, the Russian government denied its forces had crossed into Ukraine. Russia accused Kiev of trying to sabotage deliveries of humanitarian aid. Moscow called the Ukrainian report, quote, some kind of fantasy, end of quote. The Russian Foreign Ministry said, quote, it appears that a lot of people, both in Ukraine and beyond its borders, are willing to stop the humanitarian mission regardless of new bloodshed and destruction, end of quote. Maria Sakharova, a spokeswoman for the Russian Foreign Ministry, said the claim that Ukraine destroyed part of a Russian military convoy is part of a disinformation war. Russian Major General Igor Konashenkov said, quote, there is no Russian military convoy that allegedly crossed the Russian-Ukrainian border at night or in the daytime. NATO accused Russia of escalating the Ukraine crisis by carrying out an incursion into Ukrainian territory. NATO said it was verifying the report published in the Telegraph that 23 Russian military vehicles crossed the border last night. NATO also accused Moscow of active involvement in the destabilization of Ukraine. Britain summoned Moscow's ambassador to clarify the situation. Britain's Foreign Secretary Philip Hammond said, quote, if there are any Russian military personnel or vehicles in Ukraine, they need to be withdrawn immediately or the consequences will be very serious, end of quote. In response to today's developments, foreign ministers of the 28-member European Union agreed today to consider imposing a new batch of economic sanctions against Russia. Dutch Foreign Minister Frans Timmermans demanded that Moscow stop creating havoc in eastern Ukraine. Meanwhile, 600 U.S. soldiers from Fort Hood, Texas, will deploy to Poland and other nearby Baltic nations to reassure nervous European allies that the U.S. will fulfill its NATO commitment to defend them in the event of war with Russia. The troops and their equipment, including M1 Abrams tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, and armored personnel carriers, will go to Europe in October for a 3-month series of training exercises. Allied paratroopers have been conducting exercises with Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia since April as part of ongoing Operation Atlantic Resolve. Barack Obama interrupted his golf game yesterday to lie to the world about Iraq. He declared that his limited airstrikes in northern Iraq broke the back of ISIS's siege of a mountain range where tens of thousands of terrified Iraqis had fled to escape the Islamic sword of Muslim militants. Mr. Obama said it's now unlikely the U.S. would drop more food and water on the mountain range since so few people are there. Humanitarian workers, however, blasted Mr. Obama's glib assurance that there are few people on the mountain range. They said there are approximately 100,000 Iraqis who are hiding in refugee camps in northern Iraq. The Washington Post reported that ISIS is trying to establish terror cells in Western nations. ABC News reported that the U.S. Secret Service is aware of a photograph tweeted last week that appears to show the ISIS black flag displayed on a smartphone being held near the fence on the north side of the White House. The image was one of two attached to a tweet sent last week and one earlier in June. The tweet said, quote, "We are in your state. We are in your cities. We are in your streets." And it also said, "Soldiers of the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria will pass from here soon," end of quote. Well, personally, I'm not so much worried about the ISIS flag flying outside the White House. I'm much more worried about it flying inside the White House. Former Florida Congressman and Iraq war veteran Alan West publicly accused Barack Obama of being an Islamist who is intentionally working against the national security of the United States of America. Among 6 examples he gave to back up his claim, he said, was Barack Obama's decision to release 5 Taliban commandos in exchange for Sergeant Bergdahl, who was accused by his fellow soldiers of being a deserter, also providing weapons of support to the Egyptian government led by the Muslim Brotherhood. Number 3, negotiating with Hamas. And he also talked about Obama's recent decision to lift a ban on Libyans attending American flight schools and studying nuclear science, a ban that has been in place since 1983. Congressman West said, quote, "Can anyone explain what the strategy and objective is here in lifting this ban with a nation that is or should be on the terrorist watch list? Sorry, but I can only explain this one way. Barack Hussein Obama is an Islamist in his foreign policy perspectives and supports their cause." Alan West went on to say, "The pivot away from the Middle East seems to be nothing more than an opportunity to enable Islamists and their goals. Anyone supporting this Libyan ban being lifted is indeed an enemy of this state." End of quote. Again, statement by Alan West, former congressman from the state of Florida and a U.S. veteran from the Iraq War. I'm Rick Wiles. You're listening to True News. I'm going to take a break, and when we come back, former Muslim Brotherhood member and now born-again Christian WALID SHOEBAT will be here. And I'm going to ask him, does he think Barack Hussein Obama is an Islamist? And does he think he is a jihadist? Don't go away. I'll be back in 1 minute.
You're listening to True News, the end-time newscast. Rick will return after this announcement.
For over 16 years, listener-supported True News has been the champion of news and content not heard in mainline media. The time is at hand. True News has expanded its message to 12 hours a day, 7 days a week on 2 international shortwave stations. That's almost 9,000 hours of programming a year. We now produce or broadcast Revelation Ready, End Times Outpost, True News, Strength for the Journey, Preparing for the End Times, Real Science Radio, Homecoming Radio, and more amazing content is coming. We reach out through radio, YouTube, Blog Talk, shortwave, and our new smartphone app with over 10,000 downloads in just 2 weeks. True News is spreading the message of the second coming of Jesus Christ because of your faithful support to this vital message.
A message like no other.
But we can only go so far with the resources we have. Keep the message growing and strong. Support True News. Go to TrueNews.com to see how you can keep spreading this critical message. That's TRUNEWS.com.
You're listening to True News, the end-time newscast, reporting the second coming of Jesus Christ. I'm Rick Wiles. The savage slaughter of innocent Christian men and women and children in Iraq and Syria has emotionally and spiritually depleted me of words to adequately express my shock and horror regarding the diabolical plans and strategies of the U.S. government regime that is setting the Middle East on fire to accomplish its grand scheme. Former U.S. Congressman Alan West yesterday publicly expressed what I have been saying on this radio program for a long time. Barack Obama is an Islamist. Mr. Obama boasted yesterday that he halted the ISIS siege of Iraqis hiding in fear on a mountain in northern Iraq. Let me make this very plain. He's a liar. He ordered the U.S. military to carry out a handful of meaningless airstrikes to create the public perception that he was doing something to stop the genocide. The truth is, Mr. Obama went on vacation and has spent his time golfing and dancing while the world burns. I've reported on this program as far back as 2011 that the CIA was involved in a covert operation to arm and train the most heinous of all Muslim militants to fight against the Syrian government. That covert operation had the support of politicians such as John McCain and Lindsey Graham. Likewise, I have repeatedly reported for years that Mr. Obama is a supporter of the Muslim Brotherhood. Let me be perfectly blunt. ISIS and the U.S. government are the same. You cannot separate the two. The U.S. government created ISIS just like it created Al-Qaeda. But Al-Qaeda wasn't bloody enough for them, so they had to create a worse monster to get the job done. WALID SHOEBAT is on the telephone to discuss this genocide of Christians in the Middle East. He is a former member of the Muslim Brotherhood. Thank God he came to know Jesus Christ as his Savior. His website is shoebat.com, Shoebat. WALID, you've been on this program many times over the years, but this is a really somber time right now. I mean, we're witnessing genocide of our brethren in Iraq and in Syria. There are no other words to describe what's taking place. This is genocide.
Yes, absolutely. It is the wiping away of some of the forms of the oldest forms of Christianity, the Assyrian Christians, the Chaldeans in Iraq. These people speak Aramaic, the language of Jesus Christ. They've been there for thousands of years, before the Muslims even took over that land. They had their homes marked with the letter Nun in Arabic, which means N for a Nazarene, follower of the Nazarene. They had to endure all kinds of humiliation, and they were given the option between becoming a Muslim, pay the jizya taxation, or to leave. They chose to leave. Not one of them chose to convert to Islam or pay the jizya to satisfy the bigot. They were cleansed from all their clothing, everything, their luggage. Many of them lost their passports. They took the passports away from them. And not only that, the remainder of the people that remain there who's paying the so-called jizya are being knocked at the door by the ISIS, telling them how many girls do you have who are unmarried, so they can force them to marry. And not only that, they took 200 women, stripped them naked, and sold them in Suq al-Riqqa. Suq al-Riqqa is slavery market, selling the girls after killing the children, after beheading the husbands, and selling them in the market for sex slaves. This is reminiscent to how Islam first started, and we're seeing a resurgence of this type of Islam in a massive scale in Iraq and Syria. The United States is silent about it. They go to help the Yazidis, which is fine and dandy. The Yazidis worship Ta'us al-Malaika, which is the peacock of all angels. And then they ignore the plight of the Christians from Qaraqosh, the largest village. 60,000 Christians were forced to flee to Erbil and other places in Kurdistan. The Peshmerga, the Kurdish army, it's likely that they cannot withstand that onslaught by the ISIS. The Turkish borders give hard time to the Christians. The Kurdish borders give a hard time to the Christians. They're stuck in the streets. They're sleeping in churches. And they are hungry. In fact, just yesterday I got the news 6 died from heat stroke because very few are providing tents. And so they don't even have tents, some of them, in which they're dying from heat stroke out of anything. And it's to no end. The Syrian Christians in Ma'lula and other places in Syria was forgotten about. This happened just not now. It happened with Syrian Christians. And the Christians of Al-Wadi decided to hold arms. The Russians, out of all people, supplied weapons and helped the Christians to fend for themselves. They killed hundreds of terrorists defending their church at a hill. It's a victory, and nobody wants to talk about Christian militarism, that Christians have a right to bear arms. In fact, even the Pope said something about helping militarily and allowing Christians to defend themselves. and nothing has happened from the administration. The French says if Christians land in France, we're not going to turn them back. But there's no real efforts to airlift these people to safety, to Christian lands. So it's the same issue that we had when the Crusaders began, in which the Christians were persecuted. They had to flee to go to Christian lands. We're living the Crusades right now. And when I talk to my brethren about this, all they can tell me is that Christians can't lift arms. They can't bear arms. They have to turn the other cheeks. And I ask, why is it that we as Americans don't turn the other cheek? And Israel doesn't turn the other cheek, and God bless Israel. We support Israel. But the Christian has to turn the other cheek when his daughter is being molested, when his house is being taken over, when he's being marked as Nazi Germany, when they mark the shops for the Jews, and it says the word Yehudi on it. Now we have the letter N, which means Christian. It's reminiscent to what happened in Nazi Germany. Christians can't buy or sell. They can't take public office. All the Christians were fired from their jobs, and on top of it, they have to pay jizya, which they can't afford because they don't have a job, and to no avail, and nothing is happening. Where is the church? Where is the pastors who would stand on the White House lawn by now? They should be demonstrating on the streets of Washington, D.C., right there in front of the White House, saying, Obama, let my people go. But no one is even doing anything from the religious apparatus in America.
Walid, I can't stand watching Christian religious television anymore. I gave up on it a long time ago. But the other night, I was home alone, and I turned on 2 international Christian networks just to see if they would even mention the genocide that was going on. I knew in advance, likelihood they're not going to say anything. It was on for hours, playing in the background, and not one time, nobody on either network mentioned the genocide. What they talked about was a bunch of silly, stupid, just junk, just focused on themselves, on their comfortable American life, and they can't even bring themselves to mention that our brethren are being slaughtered. I don't know what it's going to take to wake up Christians in the United States and Canada and the West. I guess they won't wake up until Muslims are butchering children inside Sunday school classrooms on a Sunday morning, in the United States. Wally, did you notice last week, for several days, there was a lot of international news coverage on the plight of the Christians, and then suddenly it went dark. And just as fast as the coverage of the Christians disappeared, it was replaced by the plight of the Yazidis. And you mentioned them. It's a small sect. They're followers of Zoroastrianism. They should not suffer for any reason. God help them. I mean, they're members of a cult, but they're human beings. They should not be slaughtered for their beliefs any more than anybody else is. But what I'm pointing out is how the Western media in the United States, Canada, Great Britain, Australia, New Zealand, it was like a signal went out. It's like a message went out to all the editors of the major newspapers. Don't talk about the Christian persecution anymore. Replace it with the plight of the Yazidis. Did you notice how that happened last week?
Absolutely. It's because the Yazidis are not Christian.
But who sent the signal? Who told the editors not to talk about the Christian persecution?
Well, that's a good question. The only answer I have is that much of the media is liberal, and they have a hatred towards Christianity. And so they're silent about Christianity, and they defend the Yazidis because Ta'us al-Malaika, or the peacock of angels, is a more prominent God to them than the God of the Bible. And I remind the fellows out there listening, when Christ comes, he's going to say, I was hungry, you gave me food. I was naked, you clothed me. I was in prison, you visited me. And they ask him, when did we do these? And he says, just as you did it to the least of these, my brethren. Who's he talking about? He's talking about the persecuted Jews and the persecuted Christians. Who's his brethren? Because you can find verses in the Bible that says brethren. Moses was a brethren, which is physical, literal Jews, and there's adopted brethren, which is the church. And so he's going to judge the church based on what happens in the tribulation time towards the Christians and the Jews. And so why would the liberal want to care? He hates Christianity. He's doomed to darkness. And the Christians who are lukewarm, they're not really Christians. They think they're Christians, because how could somebody be a Christian and stand by when somebody is burning in a flame and say, you know, I'm saved by faith and that's it. I'm done. I don't have to do anything in my life. And that's the problem I even have. I even got attacked by fellow brethren. Look, if you go to my website and you look at the comments, you can see the attacks that we have rescue Christians. We're rescuing Christians. In fact, we started an NGO in Iraq, and we have people on the ground. And I'm being condemned for rescuing Christians because these are Chaldean Christians. They're not evangelical American. They don't adhere to Protestant theology. And so to many Christians in America, these are not saved, so why should we save them? And it behooves me to think this way. If somebody says, I believe in Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, if he has errors galore, but he believes in the crucifixion, he believes in Jesus Christ, I disagree with him in so many points about all kinds of things, to me he's still a Christian. It is my duty to help and save that Christian. And, you know, do we want to isolate Christianity, only the American version of Christianity? There's other versions of Christianity, you know, they're quite a little different here and there. But there's Eastern Orthodox, there's Greek Orthodox, there's Coptic Christians in Egypt, there's the Chaldean Christians in Iraq, Assyrian Christians in Iraq. These are the oldest churches known to man, you know. So do we stand by and be silent? And I ask myself all the time, you know, who's being butchered? Are those not Christ's children? You know, just because we don't agree with them on this point and that point, and we can get into all kinds of theological debates over the issue, and we ignore the main factor, and that these people, they die for Christ. They refused to accept the badge of Islam. They refused everything, including even when their women were raped, to renege on Christ. And somebody's going to tell me these are not my brothers? Of course they're my brothers.
I'm totally with you, Walid. I don't know what to say about these boneheaded religious people in the United States. I mean, some of these people that write to me and email me, I don't know what to say. They're so religious, you know. I have to question if they're saved. They're just religious. Really, you know, because honestly, how can you be so cold-hearted? I mean, even the Yazidis,
they call you afraid.
Yeah, the Yazidis, I would lay down my life to save these Yazidi people, and they're in a cult. I mean, they're being butchered. This is savagery. Correct. It's a savagery. I mean, they're chopping off heads, they're cutting babies in half. This is unspeakable atrocities against humanity. And I think the whole human race ought to be outraged. And, you know, you mentioned the Crusades. You know, I'm sick and tired of these mamby-pamby Christians apologizing for the Crusades. For heaven's sakes, you know why they had Crusades? Because the Christians got fed up with Muslims killing Christians who were making pilgrimages to Jerusalem. One day they said, we're going to saddle up and go after them. We're tired of it. And that's why they had Crusades. They were trying to eradicate the followers of Muhammad because of the violence and the bloodshed and the persecution against the church. And this ugly spirit is loose again. It is loose on the planet right now. What do you think of Barack Obama's boast yesterday that he saved the Yazidis? He halted the humanitarian disaster. What is this guy smoking?
Well, you know, Barack Hussein Obama is, in my view, a Muslim. End of story. Why do I say this? It's very simple. He said himself to the New York Times that the most beautiful sound he's ever heard is the call to the prayer, which is the doctrinal faith of Islam. I declare there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger. If that's the most beautiful sound he's ever heard in his life, then he has never converted to Christianity. That should be clear, done with, that we don't have a Christian president as claimed. Of course, we have Jeremiah White tell us also about this kind of thing, and he's really not a Christian. Why would he want to be saving the Christians? He wants to save the Yazidis, he wants to save the Muslims. It was Barack Hussein Obama who went to Cairo and insisted that the Muslim Brotherhood be present at his historic so-called speech, and that basically gave the spark for the Muslim Brotherhood to take over Egypt, in which the Egyptians finally said enough is enough and tossed them out, and Barack Hussein Obama was very upset at Sisi and began to threaten to take funding from Egypt. And so we can see Barack Hussein Obama is upset when the Muslim Brotherhood loses, and he rejoices when the Muslim Brotherhood is victorious. So how much does it take, after looking at the family of Barack Hussein Obama, the grandmother, the brother, the whole family, and how he relates with them, and how he works with them, and how they run recruitment, and with Lewis Lerner allowing a 501c3 for his brother Malik Obama to raise funds for what? To recruit Muslims in Africa to join the most virulent Wahhabi schools in Saudi Arabia. Al-Qura University, that's where they go to. And that's where his cousin Musa Ismail Obama stated on Al Jazeera, and I translated it to the English. So we know the makeup of Barack Hussein Obama. But perhaps the American people finally are waking up to the reality of who this president is and what he represents. The moment we say we think he's a Muslim, we are anathematized. But if I said Barack Hussein Obama is, let's see, New Ager, I think he is Mormon, I think he is something else, that's okay. But to attribute the religion of peace to Barack Hussein Obama is anathema. Why? Because they know it's not a religion of peace. Because they know it's the truth. When you hit the nail on the head, it seems to aggravate the devils. And so, this is the status quo we live in. That's why every Christian has to do on their own to help their fellow brothers, not to depend on the government or the United States president at this moment. But know next time when you go to the ballot box, know who you're voting for. This is why I keep saying, American naivete is no match to 14 centuries of Islamic deception.
Walid, Barack Obama is more than a Muslim. He is a jihadist. He is waging jihad from inside the White House. His foreign policy is 100% pro-Islam. He has waged jihad on this country. He has shredded the Constitution. He has defiled the U.S. military by forcing the military to accept homosexuality. People go, wait a minute. Muslims don't accept homosexuality. That's right. Obama is destroying Christian America. That's his assignment. As a jihadist, it is to destroy Christian America. Everything this man has done in the economy, in the military, in foreign affairs, everything the man has done has damaged the nation. He's shredding the country to pieces. He is a jihadist. I'm convinced of it. And when the American people wake up and realize that they have an enemy in the White House, a jihadist in the White House, and his CIA director, John Brennan, who loves to speak in Arabic and praise Allah. I mean, the CIA is under the direction of an Islamist also? What's happening here?
Well, what's happening is the infiltration. But we cannot be infiltrated until we're sleeping behind the wheel. Look, I believe that God appoints the rulers in accordance to the hearts of the masses. America has abandoned its Judeo-Christian ethics, and so God has given them to their own desires, and that's why we have Obama. When Americans wake up and God removes Obama, and we have a different president, maybe God will have mercy on us. But it's very clear, as you said, Brennan, he's pussyfooting with Islam, and in fact, some reports say he converted to Islam. There's no absolute confirmation of this conversion, but nevertheless, his compliments of Islam. and the infiltration at the high levels. Even in the case of Benghazi, we talked about Al-Hassani, who was in the same college, university with Huma Abedin, under Anwar al-Awlaki, receives the smoking gun email regarding the Benghazi issue and worked with the President of the United States. I was the first to break this kind of news. As soon as the smoking gun email came out, I discovered who were the recipients. One of them is Al-Hassani, an Islamist, and I showed all the evidences. So they work right there in the cabinet. They're with Hillary Clinton as Huma Abedin. They're in the military as Taha Jaber al-Alawani, who recruits Muslim clergy, and that's why we have Nidal Malik Hassan as a result of this kind of garbage. And the military has been demoralized so much so that American youth are saying, why should we join the military? He's doing all kinds of things to destroy the military, all kinds of things to destroy the morale of the American people, caused havoc in Syria, caused havoc in Libya, caused havoc in Egypt, is causing havoc right now in the Levant, and then he wants to shoot 2 missiles from a jet and say, I did my job. We know that's a ruse. If he truly is a Christian, he would be rescuing Christians, but he's not.
Walid, in 2008, I was in Nairobi, Kenya, and Barack Obama was a senator running for president, and everywhere I went in Kenya, Kenyan Christians said to me, please go back and tell the Americans, do not elect Barack Obama. I heard this repeatedly during that visit to Kenya in 2008. I think this was July of 2008. And as I inquired from Kenyans, why are you saying this about Barack Obama? Well, they knew a lot about him. I mean, they knew a lot about Barack Obama. Apparently, he's got, pretty deep roots there in Kenya. But the thing that was told to me numerous times, including by a man that was very close to the president of Kenya at that time, was that Obama intervened in the presidential election, and that was in 2007. And when his cousin, Raila Odinga, did not win the presidential election, that's when they had the riots in Kenya. And they had the machetes and they were chopping people. And I personally met a man who had his arm chopped off because he did not vote for Raila Odinga. And I saw the churches that had been burned. I saw the tens of thousands of people sleeping in tents, because their homes had been burned down because they did not vote for Raila Odinga. And so the Christians were telling me, Barack Obama is a troublemaker. He came to Kenya and he started trouble. He got involved in our election, and he raised money in America for his cousin, Raila Odinga. And in fact, the man who was an advisor to the president at that time told me that the president of Kenya called, it would have been Condoleezza Rice. She was Secretary of State, I believe, at that time. But he called Condoleezza Rice and said, please get your Senator Obama out of my country. I mean, he wanted him out because of the trouble this man was causing. I mean, Barack Obama is a troublemaker. He is a radical. He is an instigator of revolution. And Walid, the story about Raila Odinga in 2007 signed a pact with the Muslims that if he was elected president, he would introduce Sharia law in Kenya. And then after Obama got in the White House, he and Hillary Clinton pressured Kenya to revise their constitution. They had to write a new constitution. And 2 things they got into that constitution. They got the door open for Sharia law, and they opened the door for abortion. They overturned Kenya's opposition to abortion. That was Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. And so I heard this firsthand, that Obama and Raila Odinga were revolutionaries. They were stirring strife in Kenya. There was a pact with the Muslims. This goes back to 2000, 2008. I mean, people don't know who this guy is. This is a dangerous man.
In fact, to confirm what you said, I take another case in point, and that is Sudan. Keir Silva was trying to defend the Christians of southern Sudan against northern Sudan, which had an air force which was bombarding Nubians and do all kinds of atrocities there. And finally, when the southern Sudanese wanted to react to what the Islamists were doing in their jihad expeditions, it was President Obama who talked to Keir Silva personally and told him to not defend themselves, or else there would be huge pressure against him. Why would he do that? I mean, it's impossible to explain it any other way except that he was helping North Sudan, the Muslim state of North Sudan. Omar al-Bashir. In fact, Omar al-Bashir, you have his brother Malik Obama works right under Suwar Dahab, who is the associate of Omar al-Bashir, right in the government. This is a terror state. And you could say, well, that's guilt by association. But if that's guilt by association, why would the government allow his brother to raise funds under a 501c3, in which Malik Obama himself, his brother, I have a video I could show you in which he was recorded, and the case was that he was buying a girl. He had many wives. He has plural marriages. And one of the young girls he bought, in fact, she's underage. And the question was, by what right did you get this girl? He says, I paid the money for her brother and her mother. I have a document to prove that I paid the money for the girl. So he's buying girls, making a harem, sex slaves, what have you, in Kogulu, Kenya. And he starts a mosque. In fact, I was the first to investigate all these things to show where the money was coming from, Wahhabi money. I even pinpointed who was giving him the money. It was Wahhabi infrastructure giving the money to build these mosques. And then he claims that he has the Barack Hussein Obama Foundation that supposedly helps AIDS victims and widows and so on and so forth, when it was revealed very clearly all the money that he's getting for the Islamic infrastructure was coming from the Wahhabists, and the rest of the monies was recruiting students from not only Kogelo, from all over Africa, to send them to Al-Qura University in Saudi Arabia. In fact, his grandmother went to the Hajj, and she was given royal treatment. So we have the family connection.
Are you talking about Osama bin Laden's brother or Barack Hussein Obama's brother?
Barack Hussein Obama's brother.
Yeah. See, I want people to make sure that they understand. You're talking about the brother of the freak that's in the White House.
Correct. And not only his brother, his uncle Saeed Obama, we have the photos with him sitting with the Wahhabists in Saudi Arabia, making deals and conniving all kinds of Islamist things. In fact, I have him in Arabic insisting, and I've translated it from the Arabic, this is his uncle, Saeed Obama, who's the main conduit of communique between President Obama and his family in Kogelo. He said there isn't a single name in the Obama family that is not Muslim. Every member of the Obama family is Muslim. Well, hello, that would include the president, wouldn't it? So how could he make such a statement and exclude the president? He was talking in Arabic to the Arabs. He was talking to the Egyptians when the Muslim Brotherhood was victorious. In other words, he was telling the Muslim Brotherhood, don't worry, the president himself is a Muslim. And that's from his own family, proving beyond shadow of a doubt.
And if Barack Obama had truly converted to Christianity, as his spinmeisters want us to believe, then he would be hated by his Islamic family.
Where's the testimony? That's my first question. Can you give me a $5 CD of Barack Hussein Obama's testimony in his conversion to Christianity? Can anybody on earth provide me with this testimony? It doesn't exist. He's never given a Christian testimony. And a Christian testimony from somebody who left Islam, people don't leave a religion unless they have a problem with that religion. What is the problem with Obama's previous religion? Did he ever express what his problems with Islam is? No. If you go to YouTube and just put Obama Quran, and you can hear him saying the Quran says, the Quran says, the Quran says, in a very positive way. And put Obama Bible, he has never once made a statement positive about the Bible. Didn't you know the Bible teaches slavery? Have you not read your Bibles lately? And so he's putting down the Bible, elevating the Quran in every single statement after his supposed conversion. So, it's mute to even discuss with anybody or even debate with anybody that Barack Hussein Obama is Christian. Who's going to debate me on Obama's religion? It is impossible, because the first question I would ask, show me his Christian testimony. It doesn't exist.
What I think is really crazy, Walid, is that we're having this conversation.
That's true.
I mean, you want to talk about bizarre and crazy, that we're having this conversation that the man in the White House is a Muslim, a jihadist. This is a dangerous revolutionary, and we're having this conversation like we've got to convince people of the obvious.
Mm-hmm. The emperor is naked, and his buttocks is showing to the whole world, and nobody wants to say he's naked. You see, that's the whole idea with the emperor is naked. Nobody wants to say anything because they're afraid of the emperor, they're afraid of the media, because the moment you say anything, you will get labeled. You will get a sticky label on your forehead that you're a conspiracy theorist, that I'm not a conspiracy theorist. In fact, I don't even listen to Alex Jones. To me, I look at the evidence, and the evidence and the facts very much clearly state from his family's testimonies, from his activities with his families, from the, Louis Lerner's and all these documents that gave to okay a 501c3, from Mama Sarah's testimonies, that a woman can be beaten by her husband, and in fact, even in Africa, there's interviews with the family showing how they're trying to stop the Christianization. I mean, if Obama's really interested in Christianity, why would he be supporting the movement in Africa, which his family in Africa is on the forefront to stop Christian schools in Africa, to stop missionaries in Africa? This movement is very clear. It's the Christianization of Africa. But God bless Africa. Africa has converted to Christianity. 2/3 of Africa is Christian. It used to be 2/3 Muslim. So,
which countries does he oppose the most? The ones where their leaders are the most outspoken for Christian values.
Correct. That's correct. So we look at the plan. The plan is, they do have a plan for Africa. I mean, they're very focused on Africa too. It's not just the Middle East, but Africa, the whole thing. If we just take Africa alone, what the Obama family are doing, it becomes very clear. People just have to Google my name, Shoobat, Obama, Africa, Malik, and they can see all the articles, all the essays, all the videos on camera. You can see Malik Obama on camera. You could see his cousin Musa Ismail Obama on camera making these statements. This is not just a hearsay. It's from the horse's mouth, you see. So,
it's not a conspiracy. And by the way, and I've said this before, the biggest conspiracy theorists are federal, state, and local prosecutors, because every week of every year, prosecutors at all levels of government go to grand juries and they seek indictments against people for the conspiracy to commit a crime. And they take people to court on a conspiracy indictment. So to say conspiracy theory as though that makes you a lunatic, well, then we're going to have to tell all the prosecutors that they can't seek any more indictments against people for a conspiracy to commit a crime. And that's what we're talking about. Barack Obama is conspiring to commit crimes, and he's carrying out his conspiracies. And all we're doing is just blabbing it on the radio, telling everybody what he's doing. And you also mentioned that the emperor has no clothes, and if anybody criticizes him, they're in trouble. I just noticed last Sunday on Meet the Press on NBC television, I didn't watch it, but I saw some excerpts on some various websites. The host, David Gregory of NBC News, was very aggressive in his questioning of Democrat U.S. Senator Durbin regarding the Middle East being on fire, and this was a direct result of the Obama foreign policies. And he was very, very aggressive in his questioning. That was Sunday. Yesterday, NBC television announced a new host for Meet the Press. They got rid of him, Walid. They got rid of him.
Yes. But I had James Woolsey, the head of the CIA, an old videotape which came out of Egypt. And James Woolsey, he was talking about how they're going to make the Egyptian government under Hosni Mubarak very nervous, and Libya very nervous, and how they're going to change all the systems in Libya. And for my surprise, I even saw Frank Gaffney sitting in the table clapping his hand the highest, the loudest. So it's not just only on the Democrat side, but it's also on the Republican side. There is this naivete that we need to change dictators in the Middle East. The Middle East for too long had all these dictators. Well, these dictators were placed and positioned by the British and the French, Sykes-Picot, and it is done for a reason, and that is to create secular governments and not Sharia-infused law government, in which you ask the ISIS, if you ask any terrorist in the ISIS, say, what is it that you want? The first thing he will tell you, the dismantlement of Sykes-Picot. Well, what was Sykes-Picot? Dividing the Ottoman Caliphate, dividing the Islamic powerhouse, because they have persecuted the church for so long, into fragments and creating secular governments ruled with an iron fist. That worked for decades. Egypt flourished. It was the classical era of Egypt. I can tell you about the arts in Egypt when I grew up in the Middle East. I can tell you about the arts in Syria when I grew up in the Middle East. All these things are gone, finished, out the door. There is no more Western arts, no more Western music, no more Western clothes, no more anything is removed. So this understanding, even by some, Republicans and some conservatives, that we need to remove the dictators in the Middle East, they need to go look at Sykes-Picot and what was made, and they need to understand the history. And this is the problem with America. They don't understand the history behind why the Middle East is the way it is, why we have a Saddam Hussein, why we have a Muammar Gaddafi. Under Saddam Hussein, the Christian minority, because it was a secular Ba'athist government, the Christians were protected. Even right now, under Bashar al-Assad, there is Jewish synagogues, there is Christian churches, there is no persecution of Christians in Syria. Go ask the Syrian Christian what he wants. Does he want the Free Syrian Army, or does he want Bashar al-Assad? They will all tell you, we want Bashar al-Assad because we know he's good for Christians. Yes, he's anti-Israel, but Israel can take care of itself. We have taken care of Muammar Gaddafi in the past. I remember when Reagan teamed Muammar al-Gaddafi, sent him a few jet fighters and shot a few missiles. In fact, his adopted daughter was killed in the missile attack. And you never heard anything from Muammar al-Gaddafi. He was silenced until the Pan Am. And then what happened? We removed Muammar al-Gaddafi. We wanted to remove Hosni Mubarak, who was an ally of the United States. Zayn al-Abidin in Tunisia. What was his problem?
Well, the U.S. double-crossed these people.
That's correct.
They put them into power, they propped them up for decades, and then they double-crossed them and had them killed or imprisoned.
That's correct.
Who would work with the U.S.? This is the way they play the ball game. I mean, at one time, Saddam Hussein was on the payroll of the CIA.
Yes. Now, ask Egyptians. Ask Egyptians today. Under Bush, okay, 50% of Egypt liked us, 50% of Egypt, which was the Muslim Brotherhood, hated us. Okay, well, ask now Egyptians, how do you like us? Well, the Muslim Brotherhood always hated us. But now the secular Egyptians hate us too. Why? We messed up their country. And so they accuse us of messing up their country. They say, you wanted the Arab Spring and all these things. But of course, they are also to blame because they were participants in the Arab Spring, which was robbed from under their feet. And now every Egyptian hates us. Not even Christian, not even Muslim, not even nobody. Everybody in Egypt hates the United States of America. So Obama went in this whole affair to supposedly correct the Bush policies in the Middle East so the Middle East can love us. Now the Middle East hates us even forevermore. What has he accomplished that reversed the Bush policy? Nothing.
Walid, one last question on this topic of dismantling the post-World War II Middle East. because it was the Brits in the West and the U.S. that drew the lines. There was no country Iraq. I mean, they made up these countries and drew the boundaries. And it's lasted 60, 70 years. Now it's on fire. Is there a super secret, dark, sinister force above all of this stuff that is guiding this process to set the Middle East on fire? Is somebody deliberately doing this for a plan that we have yet to figure out?
Well, I think it's a plan we have yet to figure out. It's very strange. It doesn't make any sense that Western powers are working against their own advancement. It just doesn't make any sense. But again, we fight against principalities in high places, So this is the demonic influence. And the more America becomes liberal, the more that kind of influence prevails in America. And that's what we have. It's not naivete that makes the liberal who he is. It's not. In other words, it's not naivety of Islam. They understand Islam quite well. It's agreement with Islam. The liberal agenda agrees with Islam. Al Gore loves Islam. Hillary Clinton loves Islam. She goes to the Istanbul conference, and she talks over there to the Muslims in Turkey that she's going to twist the arms of Americans not to blaspheme the Prophet of Islam. Hello, this is the First Amendment. It is about the First Amendment and the Second Amendment. People need to understand it. That's what it's about. But how can they dismantle the First Amendment? Use the film, use this whole argument, create havoc, have a bunch of people being killed, Benghazi, everything else. Now they can make the argument, we need to change our rules here. We cannot blaspheme Islam. And by that, guess what else happens? You can't say anything anymore about anything. About the homosexual agenda, you can't say anything. And that's what it's about. It's the war between good versus evil, the war between Christianity and the devil. And if we understand Christ came to destroy the works of the devil, this is what the book of John says. Yes, he came to save people. That's a main agenda. But the main agenda, the big agenda, is to destroy the works of darkness. And that's where the Christians will shine, when they fight the works of darkness.
And we're going to let that be the final word. My guest today, WALID SHOEBAT. And his website is shoebat.com, SHOEBAT, shoebat.com. WALID, God bless you. And you and I, let's have, we'll carry on our conversation privately, what we can do to help our brethren in Iraq right now. God bless you, pal.
Bless you as well.
Well, there's the closing music for our program, and not only this program's over the entire week, we appreciate you listening to True News throughout the week. We thank you for the generous support that you've given this ministry. And I will tell you that WALID SHOEBAT and I are talking privately about whether we can combine our resources together as two ministries to find a way to airlift food and supplies into the mountains of northern Iraq to help our brethren who are suffering there. So pray for us that God will give us wisdom and show us how to do this. It's dangerous territory, and it's going to mean flying over several nations, including Iran. But I'm not going to sit back and just wring my hands and complain about Barack Obama. I'm going to do everything I can to find a way to get help to my brethren who are suffering under the tyranny of Obama's Muslim buddies. So pray for us. God, have mercy on our brethren in Iraq and Syria. I'll see you on Monday.